Thank you for listening to the John and Heidi Show. We got a special guest joining us right now, Michael Horn. Michael and I have had a chance to visit just a little bit ahead of time here, and I'm absolutely fascinated with this topic. We're going to be talking about things that there's some people listening right now that are going to be going, wow, I can't believe they're even talking about this because I've never, ever heard anybody talk about it. But we're going to be talking about UFOs and extraterrestrial life. And we've got Michael Horn with the website theyfly.com. First of all, let's say hello to Michael. How are you, sir?
Well, fine, John. Thank you very much for inviting me to do this interview with you.
Well, we're excited to chat with you. Now, what is your official title? Because you said you're the English language representative, but I didn't catch all of it, so I thought I'm going to let you tell me that.
Well, I am, contractually, if you will, the American media representative for the Billy Meier Contacts.
Nice.
And, yeah, kind of nice and sweet and to the point.
Very cool. Now, Billy Meier, for people that don't know Billy, is a very interesting guy that has had a very interesting life. And he's, how old is Billy?
Meier right now, Billy is 79. He's going to be 80 on February 3rd.
And since he was 5 years old, he's had a very interesting life.
Yes. And, I think it's only fair that I kind of put a little premise out there that I think most of us would agree with, at least to set the stage for discussing this, and that is that the confirmed discovery of actual extraterrestrial life would be the single most important event in human history, exceeded only by actual authenticated contact with those life forms, those beings.
Yeah.
And because most of this, when people do hear about extraterrestrials, UFOs, so-called aliens, it's all in the realm of science fiction, scary, strange stuff, so-called alien abductions, and utter nonsense, 90-odd% of which is exactly that, utter nonsense, and fabricated. It's actually, most of that is fabricated by the intelligence agencies to keep us either unaware of the truth or fearful of the real truth, which is not to be feared. So, having put that premise out there a little bit, Billy Meier is, as I said, a nearly 80-year-old man who claims that since he was 5 years old, living in rural Switzerland, that he's been meeting with human extraterrestrials, and that these meetings, these face-to-face, voluntary, non-scary contacts go on to this very day.
Wow. So over the course of 75 years, have they been the same people that he's been talking to, or have the people that he's been having these encounters with, have they changed over the years?
Some of the people have remained the same since 1986. The first person that he claims he was meeting with was an elderly man, a human being, pretty much indistinguishable from us, except that they live a great deal longer. And of course, if it's true that these people exist and come here, they're far more advanced. His second contact person took over when this man passed away, when Meier was about 15 or 16. And it had been an 11-year period where he was tutored by that man and taught and taken to many different places on the earth and not on the earth. And then a woman took over named Esket. And the first man's name was given as Svath, S-F-A-T-H, for what it's worth with these strange names. But Esket was the second person, and she is still one of the people who intermittently interacts with him. The people who interact with him on a kind of continuous basis are people he met in 1975. All of these people are part of this overall, let's use the word, like a mission to Earth for certain purposes that have very, very much to do actually with trying to help us assure our very threatened future survival, and doing that without interfering directly with us. So that's a little bit of an overview. And some of the people that he started meeting with in 1975, he's still meeting with 41 years later.
Very cool. Now, I'm on the website, theyfly.com, and I encourage you to go there, folks, and check it out. But on that website, you can also read about things. There's a blog that you can go to, and you can learn about some of the things that Billy knew about way before we knew about them, because he was told about these future events from the people that he was meeting with. And what would you say would be maybe one or two of the most significant things that was predicted by the people that he was meeting with that he was able to foretell way before anybody else knew it was going to happen?
My goodness, there literally are so many, but let me just kind of shotgun a few out, and then you just press the hold button on my mouth there. When he was 14, Meyer was relaying information about climate change, how it was going to manifest man-made climate change. A lot of people don't believe that, but here he is at 14 warning about it, warning about the increase in frequency and intensity of all forms of storms, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, blizzards, tornadoes, tsunamis, etc., that were yet to come. He described advanced weaponry, laser-type weaponry, 1951. Moving on from there, in 58, he warns specifically about global warming, 2 U.S.-Iraq Gulf wars that would be fought under the president who would be the son of a former president. He names 2 U.S. Gulf Wars, 1958. He specifically foretells the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union, AIDS by name, plastic credit cards, portable telephones. He specifically foretells the coming of radical Islamist fundamentalist terrorism spreading worldwide, 1958. He foretells that every home will not only have a television, which is a relatively recent, acquisition for people, but a computer, which certainly wasn't, and that the computer will be, these will be interconnected electronically around the world. He describes the internet in 1958.
Wow.
In 81, he describes specifically that Paris will be attacked by terrorists, and ultimately it will fall to radical Islam. He also, in 1981, and again in 1987, specifically foretells that our country, the United States of America, will have 2 coming civil wars, one upon the other. The country will break up into 5 territories. I read that for the first time in 1986, and I literally laughed. I'm not laughing today.
No.
Moving to 1987, as I said, he specifically foretells the radical Islamist attacks, and not only Paris, but France and all of Europe will be shaken by the warriors and fanatics of Islam who retain their power for a long time. He describes the asylum seeker problem with crime coming from illegal immigration penetrating into different countries from asylum seekers. He describes in 1987 that the Russians will move their troops to a place called Arkhangelsk in northern Siberia in preparation for attacks, which, among other places, will include Scandinavia. In 2012, the Russians moved their troops to Arkhangelsk. In that same document, he foretells the Ebola epidemic. He also warns about the destruction of the World Trade Center by terrorism. This is 1987.
Oh, wow.
Now, it goes on and on. The emphasis has been, and of course he's foretold, I think I sent you a link. One of the interesting things was that in the last couple of years, the Pentagon put out an assessment, a kind of a report on things that would be affecting the concerns of the Pentagon militarily. Threat multipliers, I think was the term. They listed 12 or 14. They were 12 or 14 of the exact same things that Meyer foretold beginning as 14.
Wow. Again, visiting right now with Michael Horn. The website is theyfly.com, and I encourage you to go there, and then you can click on the blog and read about a lot of the things that we just talked about. But that's a whole lot of stuff coming at me all at once here, Michael.
Yeah, I know.
Before you and I,
a fraction of.
Before you and I talked just a little bit ago, before we came on the air, I didn't know any of this stuff was going on. So I'm trying to take this one step at a time here. Now they're telling him about this stuff far in the future. How is it that they have the ability to see this in the future? Is it, is there an explanation as to how they know what's coming?
Yes, but what I want to do is give a caveat that I like to make sure that I give at least once or twice in an interview.
Yeah.
There are things that I can claim, I can prove this is authentic. We've had his stunning UFO photos have been authenticated independently. People nowadays with their own computers, we can even test some of these photos. The scientists I have on board now, a former NASA aerospace engineer who knows this case for 35 years too. There are people who know that this is authentic. However, that's because there are things that we can test, and like some of the scientific information and some of the prophetic information, we can determine that it's true. What we can't necessarily prove is the explanation they give for how they come up. So let me say, according to the information in the case, and this is the explanations that would, address how they know these things. So there are a few means, one of which is that they have extremely advanced computer technology. They claim that they are at least 8,000 years ahead of us technologically. Now, that's not a straight line. That's an exponential spiral,
So they have like an Apple 7 or Apple 9 already. So Apple 7000. No, they're way ahead of us then.
Yeah, they have it. They wear it on a little ring on their finger.
Yeah. No, all kidding aside, that it would take some amazing computing power to be able to do that.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. They have, again, according to the information in the case, their technology is monumentally, compared to ours, and they've described some of it to Meyer. I did have the opportunity myself in 2011 to, if you will, encounter or view one of the devices that they use for gathering information so that they can make their projections, their crunching. Let me just first say, we have prophets on our world. We call them weathermen, stock analysts, financial experts, sportscasters. We have architects and engineers and physicists. These are all people who take known, given information, crunch it, and make projections with varying degrees of accuracy.
Yeah.
Now, just to say, assuming that it's true these people exist, they have devices that constantly monitor our world and gather information on an ongoing basis, and they have sophisticated computers. That's one way in which they claim they do this. Another means, as we might expect along the lines of something seemingly science fiction, they have the option on certain occasions to literally travel in time. And that means not only the past, but the future.
Wow.
You cannot change the past. Yeah. And some of that is astounding. As a matter of fact, one of them, if we get to it, about the coming San Francisco earthquake, is really, if I had any hair left, it'd be hair curling just to think about it. But there's another means, and that is that they have people in their worlds who are highly developed in, we'd say, consciousness. Some people would use the word spirituality, but they are highly developed mentally and in their consciousness. And as has been true on our own planet, even going back to antiquity, if you will, they have these people who are seers with high degrees of accuracy. I can't explain it any better. And Meyer himself has the abilities that were taught to him since childhood to be able to calculate, and then in that sense to foresee specific events and to do these things himself. He does not do the majority of it, and he does some, and these people who are called the Plejaren really bring him most of the information that we publish as scientific, especially in specific world event-related prophetic information.
So one of the things that I was thinking of while you were talking about all these different predictions, it reminded me of somebody that, everybody's heard the name Nostradamus. And
right.
it kind of makes you wonder because, to this day, they have no idea how he knew all of these things that were written in his quatrains. But, Nostradamus predicted all of these things. Could it be possible that the Plejaren, am I saying it right, Plejaren?
You got it.
Could it be possible that the Plejaren have been here even longer than maybe we think. They've been visiting with Billy for 75 years, but could they have been here back during Nostradamus' day as well?
Well, it's a great question. Let me say just a couple things about Nostradamus, and then I will answer that more directly. Nostradamus put things in kind of cryptic and mystical quatrains, which are left open to interpretation. Again, varying degrees of accuracy in interpretation and/or in his prognostications. In Meyer's case, these are pretty unambiguous. There's only a couple places where there is any kind of poetic or symbolic talk used. The majority of the stuff is pretty much in your face. This is what we're telling you. And here's the kicker that addresses your question. They claim to have been working with people on Earth since about 13,500 years ago, and we will know the names of some of those people, and they are Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and here comes a name that won't be that familiar to a lot of people, Emmanuel, and I'll come back to it, and actually they say Muhammad. Now since that's going to be a little provocative too, let me go back to Emmanuel and simply tell you what the information, according to the case, states. Emmanuel, they claim, was the man upon whom a false person was based who never lived, and that person was known to us as Jesus Christ. Now, it's been pointed out by friends of mine who are kind of historically oriented that there is zero actual historical evidence for a man whose life apparently changed the world as we know it. You can go and look up books on Julius Caesar from whatever BC, and you can find a treasure trove of them. We have nothing comparable for a man who supposedly walked on water and healed the dead and was crucified. However, the Pleiadians say this man did exist. Gabriel was a member of their own federation who worked with Emmanuel, and many of the things that we know about Emmanuel are true, if not somewhat different, and many of the things we've been told about, quote-unquote, Jesus Christ are not true. Was there a crucifixion? Yes. Did he die? No. And interestingly enough, apart from Meyer's information on this, which is pretty vast, and a new book comes out before the end of the year, which is mind-blowing. It is the original texts that are attributed to Emmanuel. I'll get into how they came about in a second, but to complete the other thought, what they're saying is that Emmanuel was prepared for that event. He knew that was coming to him. And Gabriel, as well as certain healers who came all the way from India to minister to him in the tomb when he was taken down from the cross in an apparent death-like state. Now, I won't plunge into all that. It's controversial. I recognize that. There's nothing to believe in this case. People can make up their own mind if they choose to investigate it. However, there are some interesting aspects here to what is contained in the book that's called the Talmud Emmanuel. And that is a document that was co-discovered by Meyer and a Greek Orthodox priest, ex-Greek Orthodox priest, actually, in 1964 in what's known as Old Jerusalem. And the story that we have with this, and we actually have a photograph of Meyer with the other guy, we don't have a photograph of the text, but what happened was they were led, apparently telepathically, by the Pleiadians to a little, what appeared to be like a little hillside or a burn, and there was a small hole visible on the outside, and Meyer dug there. It opened so it was large enough for he and the other man to get inside with their flashlights. And they found what was clearly a very, very ancient tomb. The stones on the floor were, set in place, and they went about lifting stones because Meyer had been told long before this that he would be involved in the discovery and that there would be things to find. So they did. They found a number of animal skin wrapped, resin encrusted animal skin wrapped ancient scrolls in Aramaic, which this ex-priest Isa Rashid could read, and he also could read and write German. And at that point, he was entrusted with these scrolls and spent the next 6 years intermittently translating portions of them until he was discovered by various parties in Jerusalem who found out that he had this, and he and his family had to flee with their lives. And with the scrolls, they fled into Lebanon. This is, one of these long stories. I'll make it real short at this point. They fled into Lebanon. They hid the scrolls in the walls of a home that they were in. The Israelis came in within a week's time, destroyed the village. The scrolls were destroyed. They escaped with their lives. But later in Baghdad, he and his family were assassinated ostensibly by the Mossad, but not before he had sent off a portion of the translated scrolls.
Wow, that is crazy. Again, visiting right now with Michael Horn, and the website is theyfly.com. And again, there's a lot of info coming at me all at once here, Michael. So
I could have compassion for you.
Now, there's a DVD I see on here. It says award-winning, and Did They Listen? Tell me a little bit about the DVD.
Well, this is my fifth or sixth, film that I've either produced or co-produced, documentary on the Meyer case. And it's a kind of, how can I call it, mainstream-friendly overview. And I, as soon as I say that, I laugh, and I need to kind of explain. My daughter is not particularly into this part of my life and work. And I've never, of course, required that she had to be. And she's seen my other films. She always said to me, Dad, I don't know if everybody's going to get that. It's a little complicated. So I said, well, I'm making another film, and going to have a screening. She said, I'm going to bring a pen and paper. So I'm going to give you notes so you can fix things. I said, okay. So we made the film, and we had the screening, and she sat down with her pen and paper, and then afterwards the lights came up, and I said, okay, what do you want to tell me? And she said, Dad, nothing. I understood that. My friends would understand that. That's good. Go for it. So I did, and, I think we won a couple of awards and all that stuff with it. And basically, it is an ongoing interview with me with the insertion of films and photos of Myers and information on specific prophecies, and even a photograph not taken by me, taken in 1989 by someone in Switzerland. They were photographing some work being done at the center where Meyer lives, and they accidentally captured two of these monitoring discs in broad daylight, and it was the same exact kind of an object that I saw on October 3rd, 2011 at 10 p.m. in the mountains of Brazil when I was living there. And I said, yeah, that's it. So anyhow, we included the photos in there, and basically it kind of opens up a discussion that's accessible to people, but it's really kind of pushing the envelope to say, look, folks, we've been talking about this for some time. This isn't my first film on this, and we keep marching down the wrong road to destruction here. So, the people were warned, and did they listen? That's the question of the film.
And is that DVD available right through the website here?
Yes, it is.
All right.
And if anybody mentions your name or your show or that they heard me being interviewed by you, John, then I will send them a second film with that DVD for free.
Well, there you go. See? Sometimes it pays to know people. So just remember, John you heard it from John and Heidi. No, that doesn't happen often. Usually if somebody mentions my name, they get hung up on. So that doesn't... No, again, our guest, Michael Horn, and again, we've learned a lot in the last 23 minutes here. We've learned a ton. I grew up Christian, and you've got me concerned now because I'm like, okay, what I'm learning here kind of doesn't go with what I've known my whole life. So, but there's we'll go down that road another day maybe. So I'm not. Go ahead.
I was just going to throw one other thought in there to address that, because I understand that there are people who have many, who I know of many different faiths and beliefs that will have or have had at sometimes problems with stuff in here. One of my best friends is a lifelong Mormon, and we are the two most unlikely, portraits. And we sit and we talk about it, and he says to me, I got to tell you, this is the strangest thing that you and I can sit here and talk about all this stuff, and our cosmologies are so different. And I said, let me tell you the reason, Doug. The reason is our core values overlap. I have actually said to people, I went to a meeting of a whole other religious group. Some nice people up here where I live. They're people who are called the Baha'i. They are part of a faith that originated in Iran. They're highly persecuted offshoot of Islam. Peaceful people. Now, at one of the meetings recently, I said to them, I just want to tell you people that I have absolutely no respect for your beliefs.
Yeah.
I hope you feel the same way about mine, but I love hanging out with you because our core values are the same. And that's what matters more to me than what anybody believes. And so as a final thought about belief in Christianity and all that, when the new Talmud comes out, which I've had a proofread of, people will be very surprised to learn some things, and they can ponder it, such as that the man, however they want to refer to him, had 17 female disciples who were just as important and valuable, but never made it into the texts that we know as the Bible. I'll leave it at that, and I'll say there's so much in the explanations about how he healed, his understanding of people, how he served people, and where he lived after the crucifixion, and where there is a tomb honoring him and Mary, and it's not in the Middle East.
Huh. Well, like I said, learned a lot here. This is not at all what I was expecting to learn, but it's been very interesting to learn. Now, what we've talked about, we've kind of covered a whole bunch of stuff here. Billy Meier, so he's going to be 80 here really soon. For the last 75 years, he's had these contacts that he's been visiting with, and the predictions that he's made. I'm absolutely fascinated when you look at that and see things that were predicted, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in advance, and with very good accuracy as well. How come I've never heard of this before? I mean, it's crazy. You and I started talking about this. It's not new. He's been doing this for 75 years. Why is it that the mainstream media hasn't ever done anything to let people know about this?
Well, apart from when it's popped up that they attack it and suppress it, here's part of the explanation. In the past 40 or 50 years, there have been 23 documented attempts on Meier's life. The last one, a year ago, September, he was with another person in Switzerland that I also know. He was shot at again at night. The reason you don't hear about it is because, A, it's real. B, it threatens to completely disrupt all belief systems, all of the constraints and control mechanisms of society that aren't necessarily serving us anyhow as much as the powers that be would like us to believe they are. So on the at the highest levels of intelligence, media and corporate and a few other areas, this is deliberately suppressed. It is simply, if true, it's obviously the most important story in all of human history, still ongoing. And yet you and your listeners have never heard about it, as many people haven't. We try to put it up there. I think I mentioned you when we had our pre-conversation. People can find out on my blog. I got mentioned in WikiLeaks, one of my emails, because I ended up sending an email about this to a guy that I thought was simply a kind of a political researcher, and in fact he's a covert intelligence person who feeds information to all intelligence agencies. And one of the things he said in the WikiLeaks was a one-sentence thing: "The name alone scares me. Theyfly.com." Yes, my website. Yeah. So you have to understand that this is Putin knows about this information. They know it at the Vatican. About 4 or 5 years ago, Meier was told the Vatican is going to start to incorporate some of the things you propose into their own agendas. And then suddenly, the Vatican was talking about the environment and overpopulation, and my goodness, where did that come from? Well, we know where it came from. There's warnings in this case about an asteroid that is going to hit the Earth, and where it's going to hit, and when, if we don't come together. And 24 years after Meier published it, or 23 years after, we discovered it, and we call it asteroid Apophis. There's so much of this that it is mind-blowing. And as you know from what I sent you today, if you had a chance to look, 8 years ago, the Plejaren told Meier Hillary Clinton will not be elected. It is, the people of Earth can be grateful that Hillary Clinton will not have power put into her hands. They were speaking at that point primarily about with Obama, but they didn't say just now now or that later on it'll change or it'll be different. No, they simply stated that. So there are people that had written me, of course, like, who's going to win the election? I said, honestly, I'm not a psychic. I don't know. My sense from what I listened to on both sides of the political spectrum, I would say Trump will have the popular support. I don't know that means he wins, but if you go on what the Play Iron said 8 years ago, she won't win.
Yeah.
So it's in writing. It's been there for 8 years on my website, and some of the stuff is, for as long as I've had a website, and can I tell you one quick one that is mind-blowing to me?
Yeah.
Okay, so a few years back, about 3 years ago, I think it's 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, in July, in Las Vegas, I went to a UFO event. Yes, it's like the tinfoil hat crowd and all that, but there's some people that want to know something, if there's anything real. And I had a table there, and I had my films out and everything, and I would call him a late middle-aged guy comes walking over to the table. He looks down, and he folds his arms across his chest, and his head is going left to right like, no, no, no. Kind of a crusty guy.
Yeah.
I would say, tough character. And I said to him, sir, could I help you? He said, well, I'm interested in UFOs, but this Meyer case, can't be true. So I said, sir, what do you do? And he said, I'm a retired judge.
Oh.
Oh, really? May I step into your courtroom, Your Honor?
Yeah.
And the guy kind of squinted at me, and then he smiled. He said, come right on in. What can I do for you? I said, Your Honor, if I tell you that NASA's discovery just a couple of years ago that the core of the planet Mercury is the factor that is responsible for the contraction of the surface is not actually a unique discovery to them, but a buddy of mine in Switzerland published it in 1976. Would I have to prove that to you, Your Honor? And he looks down at me, his eyes widen, and he says, well, of course you'd have to prove it. So fortunately, I had it. I reached over and I took one of the books. There have been books published on this case, let me tell you. And I opened it up and I say, Your Honor, do you see the copyright date here? He looks down and he says, yes, I do. And I went to the page because I knew where this stuff was. I said, do you see the copyright date here? And he says, yes, even earlier. I said, can you see where this man, Mr. Meyer, asks the alleged extraterrestrial woman Semyaze, I've always wondered why the planet Mercury is contracting on this. And she says, well, that's actually fairly easy. It's because of the metal core. And I said, Your Honor, in your courtroom, who prevails? Who wins, NASA or my friend? And he looks down and he says to me, you win.
Wow.
And he bought a bunch of stuff. Yeah, because you see people who, a judge is, I'd rather be in front of a judge than almost anybody, because if I present evidence and he has to determine its validity, authenticity, he has to weigh the evidence, that which has been done to authenticate it, the credibility, all this stuff. Well, he knows that copyright is an ironclad legal international standard for proof of first or prior publication. It doesn't mean that what's in a book is true, but it does mean that whatever you're referring to was published then.
Yeah.
And it turns out, in this case, over and over, Meyer published it first, and it turns out we discover, quote unquote, later on, that it's true.
I'm looking right now on your website. There's some photos on here, and I'm kind of scrolling through and looking at some of the videos. It's absolutely fascinating, by the way. The website is theyfly.com. And where do these images come from? Are these from various places, or all from the same place? Or
the UFO photos?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Meyer took over 1,200 UFO photos, and he started taking them in 1964. He always used a film camera. His first camera was a Kodak Bellows type camera. My father had one. Those were made in the 1940s, if not earlier, and they are primitive. And then he graduated onto a 35 millimeter Olympus that had a stuck viewfinder. what this means is he never used any digital equipment for his photographs. He didn't use digital stuff. He shot one video on a video cam, and the other films, there's 8 surviving films, all shot with an 8mm film camera. So when he presented his photos for evidence, and they did a lot of testing, and even had testing done within the last 2 years, independent people who went and tested using state-of-the-art contemporary technology with the same results, but even more information about how ironclad these photos and films are, that these are large objects. They're a good distance from the camera. There's no models. There's no strings. There's no wires. There's no digital effects, special effects. I actually brought one of Meyer's films to the guys who won the Academy Award for Independence Day, won, like the first Independence Day movie, and they looked at it and they said, hey, yeah, we could duplicate that, but we'd have to go to CGI, because if otherwise you have to use a crane and wires and and they said, no, that's not hoax. And that same film was reanalyzed within the last 2 years, and again they said, nope. As a matter of fact, they found that in some cases in the film, within one frame, the ship can appear to be in 2 places at one time.
Huh.
It's mind-boggling stuff.
Well, it's been fascinating to visit with you, and like I said, when we very first started about visiting about talking, we didn't know how long this was going to be. We thought, well, we'd talk for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. It's been a little over a half hour now, so I could probably talk to you for another 45 minutes easily, but I don't want to take your whole darn night here. If people listening would like to know more, if they'd like to maybe see the DVD, if they'd like to check out the photos, they can certainly go to the website, theyfly.com. On here, can they actually purchase? Do you guys, I see we got the DVD up at the top right. They can get that. Are there other things they can purchase as well?
Yes, they can purchase things like the new photo book where they digitized 641 of Meyer's photos, UFO photos. It's mind-boggling. I've been to some of these locations myself, and I've also defeated all the skeptical challenges. But something else that they'll find will be stuff that pertains to the core reason, and that is they'll find books that teach what the Plejaren and Meyer and actually the previous prophets have been bringing to us for millennia to help us think our way to preferred future, preferred life, without enforcing it. Nothing to believe, nothing to bow down to or subscribe to, simply a teaching just like you would learn electronics or anything else. And it's called the spiritual teaching. That's the term they use, but it has no trappings of you have to, sign on to this kind of a perspective. So people are free to email me from my website. They can do that. I will respond to all emails. It just takes me time. And I don't mind questions and I don't mind challenges, because if this is true, I think people want to know.
There you go. Michael, thank you again for your time today.
John, my pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun to visit. Michael Horn has been our guest today. The website, again, is theyfly.com, and it's fascinating. I learned a lot today, and now I got to sit here and ponder life. So thanks a lot, Michael.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I bet you have that experience with a lot of people, I'm sure.
It happens.
Again, Michael Horn, the website one more time, theyfly.com. Thank you for listening to The John and Heidi Show.